Hello, I'm Joe Gunn. We are Group 4. Our project was Rural Garden Development in a Food Desert. Here's a brief overview covering a summary of the problem, what a food desert is, a little bit about our client, some of the information we have regarding this project, the progress we've made, some of our steps going forward, and a conclusion. So our problem is South Texas Advancement Resource, or STAR, is interested in developing a rural garden in a food desert. They want to utilize a combination of high tunnels as well as traditional farming methods. They also would like to determine the most efficient irrigation method to ensure proper amounts of water to the garden. Right now on the property, there is a 1 acre storage pond that collects runoff. This is good for irrigation, but there is cattle around the area, so we have to keep that in mind. They use that storage pond as well for their uses. There are 4 tunnels that will be used, about 24 feet wide and 100 feet long, 105 feet long. The traditional garden site is about 400 by 500 feet. They also would like to replicate and develop these gardens in other areas, so it has to be easily translated to other properties. All right, so here on the right, we have a map of Texas showing some of the food deserts. You can see in the southern part where it's dry and hot, there's a pretty significant amount of them. A food desert is any place that has limited access to healthy fruits and vegetables. It's in any location where it's impossible to acquire due to geographic and environmental limitations. Our specific area in Aguilaris is determined by the USDA to be a food desert due to a lack of water as well as limited shading. I'll pass it on.
So we met with our client, Mr. Annie, on November 23rd for STAR. And in this meeting, we talked more about the problem to get a better understanding of what needed to be done instead of just having a general overview of like the one we got in class. So we met with him. We talked about more details about the problem. He gave us more information on that, like where's the wind coming from, how fast it is, why are we using the tunnels, and like spacing, and like for example, he mentioned livestock in that meeting, which was very important to us, and it changed a lot of stuff. He gave us things to foresee in the project, like numbers he expected from us, like amount of vegetables produced, how all the financial analysis, what was for the expectations for us. It was like financial analysis, and since STAR has been doing projects with A&M students as well as Mr. Ranny, there are big expectations for us on what we need to deliver, what we need to do for this project. So one very important piece of information that we got after that meeting was we got 3 soil tests, one for high elevation, one for medium elevation, and one for low elevation. These soil tests are very important to us because not only they show us that there are differences between each test. One major one that we saw was the pH in the ground, as one of them had an 8 and the other ones had 7.6, 7.5. This is just the example of the low elevation soil test. With all these soil tests, there were combinations about how much nitrogen to apply other chemicals, how to apply it. And these are very important to us because they will let us know if we need to change the soil for certain plants, what we would need to add, change or reduce the soil, or maybe like a combination of different soils within the property would help us to produce the desired crop. On all these tests were all done in College Station, so we're sure they're high quality, and they'll really help us out in the project. One big thing for us is the industry regulations. As we know, OSHA is one of the biggest regulators, and that's one of the main reasons why we take class. And we talked about so much about OSHA and 360. For us, the big ones are the OSHA standards 1928.57, the hazard associated with farmstead equipment, as we have to bring tractors and all this to harvest all the fruits and vegetables. Uh, and we want to make sure that all of our employees know all the safeties, hard helmets, or whatever they need to be wearing as equipment to handle the tractors. On the OSHA standard 910 subpart H, the handling and application of fertilizers. With the soil test, we saw that it's not just applying the nitrogen, there's also other chemicals that we need to apply. And there's different ways to apply fertilizer, as we saw in other classes. But we want to make sure that all of them know the safety requirements in order to apply fertilizer, so nobody gets injured in the long run. We also want to keep records of all injuries and accidents on site. As we know, this property is down south and it's really harsh environment, especially for workers. So we want to make sure that safety is one of our priorities, because it gets really hard and tough out there when it's summer and the heat's getting to 100 degrees. And we want to make sure they all have the proper equipment to work out there and go back to their families every day.
So for our progress, the first design we are looking at implementing is an irrigation pump, and this pump will bring the water that we have in the tank to the garden. And then once the water is in the fields, we will be using a drip system to distribute it. And then for the drip system, we still need to look at the different options we have and determine which one will be best for this project. We are also looking into ways to alleviating the environmental effects of the area of the crops in order to save money and water usage due to the dry climate in the area. The first thing we need to do is arrange high tunnels for windbreak, and these 4 high tunnels will be placed in a single row perpendicular to the wind coming in from the southeast. And these tunnels will also provide shading over the garden to reduce the heat.
So going off of the alleviating the environmental circumstances, another option in addition to using a windbreak would be also to introduce some kind of shading. So the image that we have right here is actually hail protection for an orchard, which is not exactly what we would be having in mind. It would be less coverage given that our area is much larger, and also this is definitely more sturdy because it's protecting versus for hail versus the sun. But the shading would only need to be raised enough so that small tractors and employees can work under it, and it again, it wouldn't have to cover the entire thing given the sun's rotation. All of it would get some shading at some point during the day, and this could reduce the temperature given that in southern Texas it can reach up to averages of 90 in the summer, and some shade could reduce the temperature 10-15 degrees. A different solution would just be to water it as it needs. Without any wind or sun protection, it needs a lot of extra water throughout the week, and this can total up to 475,000 gallons per week. And a third option could be hydroponics. And in my initial research for this, I had assumed that it took more water, because hydroponics is actually growing plants in nutrient fortified water as opposed to soil. And when I first heard that, I assumed that it meant more water. It actually doesn't. It's pretty efficient. However, as you can see, it takes very specialized equipment. It takes specialized facilities, and it's a high return, or it's a high investment that would result in a high return. And given it's such a risk, it's still something that we're looking at. There are some companies, I listed a couple down there, 80 Acres and Freight Farms. Those are both companies that you can reach out to and they will provide the resources for you. But once again, it's another like high investment, high return. So again, you can like grow these up in rows. So, yeah. So the next steps we're going to be taking are we're going to determine water usage given the choice in crop. We're going to compare field layouts versus how they affect the weather and the dryness. We're going to consider different pump and drip irrigation systems to get the water from the tank to the field. And then we're going to talk to the Department of Soil Science and Crops to look further into our tests. Are there any questions, comments, or concerns? Thank you for your time.
Okay, Bill, you got any questions, comments, or concerns?
No, I think it was a good presentation. Given everything you said, I'm happy that y'all didn't run off because it's so hard to do. That was humor. Anyway, no, I thought it was good. And I guess I would want to see more about, I guess as you get going, there'll be more about water management, water storage, things like that in the garden. But for the first presentation, I thought it was nice. It was a good job. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, your team, what's your review?
So a lot of it was the audio cutting in and out from the computer, where it would distort it as they were speaking. That's one of the things I noticed quite a bit.
I didn't notice that. I didn't hear any audio. Maybe you need to have your hearing checked.
No, I'm saying like as they were speaking, it would like change their voice a little bit. Like,
Oh, I see.
just the way it is. I guess the microphone or
All right.
sound.
That's what we can do about that. What else?
Could we, I'm sorry, you want to go, Jason?
I can. I kind of have two questions. So, y'all mentioned the wind tunnels. Is that a part of your project that you have to implement, or is that an option for you to use those? I mean, that's kind of my first question is like, is that necessary or is it just an option y'all have?
That was recommended by our client, and it's because they're like 8-mile winds that come from the southeast. So especially if we're gonna have like any type of tall crop, that just serves as a windbreaker. And also like the way that the property is set up, like it's where the high tunnels are, it's higher elevation than the rest of the property. So it works pretty well to actually put the tunnels there with those type of winds coming in.
In addition, they provide extra growing space as well.
I have another kind of comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Y'all mentioned like the cattle and how they could possibly, potentially, I think y'all said maybe be a problem for the garden and whatnot. I mean, my comment is just that that area has a whole lot of natural wildlife, such as deer, hogs, wild hogs, and all that. And I was just going to comment that it's probably going to be more of a issue than the cattle would be.
Yeah, when we were down there was quite a bit of deer that were just rolling around. And then when we even came in the driveway the day of, there was a lot of, there were some hogs and javelinas there.
So what you're saying is that a concern you have is they need to take into account that if they're growing crops in a small area there with these tunnels, wind tunnels, they need to protect it from wildlife.
Especially like if it's a garden, I assume that means they're going to try to do something other than just like something that our project would do, which would be like a corn or cotton or milo. That means probably some type of vegetable or something, which definitely attracts wildlife more than say our crop would. They would want to definitely come eat it.
Created like a fencing or a barrier of some sort to help prevent damage to crop.
Okay, anything else?
Could we go to the slide where the topo map is?
Go to your topo map slide, please. Thank you.
I mean, one comment I would probably make is that maybe it's me, but I don't really see the readings and the values in the topo map. I just kind of see a bunch of lines, and I don't really know the elevation. Maybe just like a comment I would make.
I mean, that was kind of same for ours.
Yeah.
Okay, so what you're saying is the topo map, and this obviously applies to your project as well, doesn't really, I mean, it's what you have, but it's not really providing a lot of information. I don't see any labels on the contours. I don't know if we're dealing with an area at sea level or, 5,000 feet, but, okay.
Because the graph that we're actually given is like a huge blown map, and even trying to zoom into the figures, it's harder to read.
Yeah.
It's just what we were given.
It's like an interactive map, an interactive topo map.
Just in general.
All right. Okay, thanks. While we're talking about the map here, yeah, that is a good point. I'm sure, that you've got a map, it'll show you some contour, but I think generally this area is relatively level. So maybe the topo map is not what you need. Maybe what you need now is an aerial photo, which kind of shows, we don't really need the relief since there's not a lot of variance, but maybe just the layout of if there's wooded areas or areas that are barren or where, things like that.
I think they had an aerial photo on there.
That's right, yeah, okay.
The only thing I would say is there's a couple slides for the soil tests. But the first slide, that one, it just seemed like there's not very much information there at all. And so I would either try to put some more information on there or try to consolidate those slides somehow.
Okay. Yeah, I see what you mean. This test, this slide, there's a lot of white space.
Doesn't give you a lot of information.
And then you went to the next slide where you got your soil test, so you probably could have combined those, okay. All right, that's enough, thanks. Let's go on to Dr. Castell. You want to start with some comments?
Yeah, I myself, I found the font size small, so I had a hard time reading the text. I spent time focusing on what it was written. So I think a larger font would have made it easier for me. The information was fine. You don't put too much per slide, which is good, but I had a hard time because I had to focus on reading because it's too small and too light. The description of the problem was good, displaying. I would have liked in that same map, maybe that you pointed at the site. Again, I could not see very well where you were referring to. Maybe pointing, and I know with Zoom it's hard, but highlighting the area, I could not see. Again, it's too light and too small, the font. One question I had is like, which vegetables are you considering? You didn't mention any specific crops. What is in your mind? Is it vegetable? Is it a fruit? What is it that you're looking at growing in that area?
Initially, we're looking at vegetables.
You don't know which type? There's many.
We actually had quite a few. Currently, we're comparing how much water they need and then how much profit they could possibly return. And then we're going to compare them and then decide what would be an ideal crop.
Okay, that would have been nice to see in a slide, because I had that question. And it refers to the animals, wildlife in that area. It can become a food safety issue. So keeping the animals out from the water source is important. So I would have liked to see a little more about which vegetables are you thinking of growing in there. So these are some of the, there is a BAN team working on this too. I will advise you to communicate with them, because I believe they are at that stage trying to determine which are the best crops to grow in that area.
We got in contact with the Bain team,
Yeah.
but it was just barely like yesterday at night was when they answered. So yeah, now we're in contact with them. We're gonna talk about the projects and all that stuff.
Great, I think that, and I like a lot. If you're the first team that does that, you explain and describe your meeting with the client. That was very instructive to me, you said what happened during the meeting, what the client expects, and how you address that. So that was very good. Good job. Well done.
Yeah, I agree. That I like the fact that you mentioned your team meeting with your client and what y'all worked out there. It's good to get that. That's part of the progress report. So that's definitely what you want in there. Overall, it's a pretty good presentation for your first one. It's came in a little bit short. It's about 10 minutes. That's okay. We said 10 to 12 minutes with time for questions, so not a big deal. I was looking for a little bit more information with regard to background. You have some good data with regard to your soil test and water requirements, but let me ask you a question. Is there anybody else in the world doing what your client wants to do? Some sort of gardening in the desert using tunnels? There.
Yeah, I've seen it back. Well, I live nearby, like an hour away from there, and yeah, like at least in my hometown, there's a lot of people that do that in ranches nearby. But they do it a little bit of a different way. Like they do mostly high tunnels, but yeah, there's other people that I guess I could contact for it.
Okay, yeah, thank you, Andres. So the reason I'm asking you that is because I expected to see that as part of the background, similar solutions. You're right, there are lots of people doing that, and you can learn from that, so don't overlook that. Secondly, I was looking for a literature review, and didn't get anything there. So you're missing some things that typically we'd want to see in a background discussion. But let's talk about some other things you got. Let me jump to Rebecca. You have a slide there about the water requirement. Yeah. And you actually had some numbers. So you're kind of getting into flow analysis, which is okay. You've got some analysis of what 5 acres would require. I think it was 475,000 gallons of water per week. That's good information. It begs the question, though, since you're talking about shade, without shade, it's going to need this much water. So my question is, with shade, how much would it use? Any idea, or how would you go about solving that?
I actually had more calculations, and they're in the entire paper. I just wanted to bring some like brief information to the PowerPoint. For example, like just out of all the examples, one of them was how much water you would need for leaving it bare. However, I do have more information actually in the paper.
Okay. All right. Let me talk about some of your presentation. Joe, you sounded like you were reading a little bit, and also one of your slides, the food desert slide, you had sentences, not bullets. So let's try to avoid that. Don't have entire sentences on there. Go with bullets. Mackenzie, I felt like you were reading some too, but maybe not so much. So make sure when you're doing a presentation, you're actually have voice inflection and you're getting your point across with some emphasis and that kind of stuff. Here's ultimately what I want to leave both of these teams with. Remember last semester we ended with computer drawings and how to do computer drawings. Now this project right here with the tunnels, you guys have kind of started that. You had an aerial photo and you had some boxes on there. I'm expecting this semester to see more of a drawing of how you're going to lay these things out. Mackenzie did a good job explaining that the tunnels need to be laid out with respect to the wind. You can actually demonstrate that using some drawings. So be prepared to do that. You need to show a good plan view of how this is going to be laid out. I'd like to even see a three-dimensional view of how these tunnels are going to be laid out. But it's too early for that at this point, but that is kind of what I'm expecting. You've got a lot of data here. Like I mentioned, you need to back that up with some literature review. But ultimately, both these problems they lend themselves to a linear program. Oh, I just saw your eyes roll back in your head. Okay, remember in 301 we had the Bradley farm? They were trying to decide to plant either corn or tobacco. They had 410 acres and there were certain constraints. And how much do the Bradleys need to plant of each crop to maximize profit? This is that. This is the Bradley farm. Whether you're talking about a 5-acre garden or this entire section, if you can help determine what the optimal crops to plant using a linear program. I'll be happy to get you jump started on that, but you're going to identify some profit coefficients. You know, there's going to be a cost of planting each crop, and the cost is going to include water, but there's going to be a revenue, and so you'll come up with a profit that you can expect from each crop. You can come up with some constraints equations with regard to water usage. That's going to be a big constraint. How much does each one use? How much is available? That kind of stuff. So it doesn't have to be a real complicated linear program, but I'm going to challenge you to show me a linear program somewhere in this project, and I'll have a hard time giving you anything less than an A if you have a good linear program. Okay, I'm just going to lay that out there. If you don't use a linear program, well, I'll just, we'll see how it goes. I'm not going to have a lot of confidence that you've optimized the resources. Okay. Any other comments? Your team? Young.
Yes, I do have some comment on the slides and in dynamics. So in dynamics, I noticed that you didn't introduce the next speaker, or you introduce yourself the first time you speak. So now it's the internal progression for everybody knows everybody, that's no problem. But if we have someone outside come to this meeting, we will have hard time to know who's speaking. So at least introduce yourself at the first time you speak. And secondly, that I can see you try to prepare the slides in PowerPoint, and then you upload in Google Slides or something. And some of the labeling and it's going off. Let's see an example in figure 1. Can you go to figure 1?
Scroll back up to figure 1.
Right there. So your figure 1 is not below the pictures. It's go above the picture. But maybe you're seeing it differently in PowerPoint slides, but when you upload to Google Slides, those two may not translate too well. And the other example is the figure 4, I believe.
Sorry, I'm having trouble hearing what you said.
Figure 4.
Figure 4. The slides before the hydroponics. Yeah, so the bullets, you have unexpected indentations from the 3rd and the 4th bullet. And I don't know if it serves some purpose, but it doesn't seem reasonable to me. And the next pictures, the hydroponic one. Yeah, this picture doesn't even have a label. And I don't know where the credit comes from. But that's just some minor detail that you can work on the next time. And otherwise, it's pretty good. I like your how you set up your Zoom meetings, very clear backgrounds and good video shot of yourself. I can see it clearly. It's overall good presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, good Zoom presence. I agree with John's comment. I meant to mention that about, go back to slide 11, back up a slide. So this is what I call an out of balance slide. Your picture is really small. You got a lot of wasted white space there. So go up to the soil test slide. That's the one I really actually wrote something down on. So let's do a little, go one down right there. Andres, what would you do differently with this slide now that you're looking at it?
I'll probably make the table bigger.
Use the whole slide, man. Yes. I cannot read any of those numbers. So yeah, I'm going to use this slide as an example next semester. But hey, this is your first presentation. This is all a learning process. Now, both teams, what you get to do, make sure you email you upload your peer review to eCampus so you can get credit for that. But now you need to download the self-critique form, and you're going to watch your presentation. Jan's going to put it on YouTube. It'll be, only y'all can see it, but you're going to have to watch it, and then you're going to fill out your self-critique to see how you did. And you can critique yourself, but also critique your slides. Okay.